For centuries, the most powerful families in the world have operated by rules they never published. Rules about how wealth compounds in the dark, how influence outlasts armies, and how dynasties survive everything around them. Over 3 chapters, we follow the blueprint from its origins to its modern machinery, to the question no one in power once answered. Chapter 1. The Blueprint: Origins of Hidden Wealth. They didn't build their empires in public. They built them in private, in smoke-filled rooms, in encoded telegraphs, in agreements sealed with a handshake and protected by silence. The wealthiest families in modern history share one trait above all others. They understood that real power is never displayed. It is implied. The story of generational wealth is not the story you were taught in school. It is not about invention. It is not about timing. It is about systems, invisible systems designed to transfer advantage across generations, to insulate dynasties from the disruptions that erase ordinary fortunes. Consider what it actually takes to build wealth that survives for centuries. First generation creates. Second generation consolidates. Third generation, the statistics say, destroys. But the families we are going to study broke that pattern. They rewrote the rules of how money survives time. The Medici understood something 5 centuries ago that hedge funds are still learning today. Control the infrastructure, not just the assets. Don't own the gold, own the road the gold travels on. Don't own the building, own the institution that decides who gets to build. This philosophy, what historians call structural wealth, is the foundational blueprint for every dynasty that has lasted. In the 16th century, the Medici Bank held accounts for kings, popes, and the Holy Roman Emperor. When rulers needed to finance wars, they came to Florence. The Medicis did not simply lend money, they embedded themselves into the nervous system of power. Debt is not a transaction, it is a relationship. And relationships, unlike gold, cannot be stolen. Fast forward 400 years. The Rothschilds, operating across 5 countries simultaneously through 5 brothers, built a network that rendered them immune to the political instability that destroyed their competitors. When Napoleon fell, they profited. When the Ottoman Empire crumbled, they were there. Not because they predicted the future, but because they had positioned themselves at every node of consequence. This is what we mean by shadow architecture. Not conspiracy, infrastructure. Not secrecy, strategy. The families we will study over these 3 episodes did not hide from the world. They built the scaffolding the world hangs on. In Part 2, we will follow the money into the modern era, into the offshore holding structures, the family offices, the charitable foundations that serve simultaneously as legacy vehicles and tax fortresses. We will look at how contemporary dynasties, from the Waltons to the Kochs to the Saudis, have updated this ancient blueprint for the 21st century. Because the greatest lesson of elite wealth is this: the rules you play by were written by people who don't play by them. Chapter 2. The Engine: How Modern Dynasties Preserve Power. There is a number most people never encounter. It is the count of family offices operating quietly across Geneva, Singapore, and Dubai. Not hedge funds, not banks, private institutions existing for a single purpose: to protect and grow the wealth of one family across generations. As of the mid-2020s, more than 10,000 family offices operate worldwide. Together, they manage an estimated $6 trillion, more than the GDP of Japan. Almost none of it appears on a public exchange. The family office is the modern Medici system, a closed capital loop, staffed by elite financial engineers, lawyers, and tax architects, operating entirely outside public scrutiny. They acquire private companies, agricultural land, infrastructure stakes, and pre-IPO equity. They move capital across jurisdictions with the efficiency of water finding its lowest point. The Walton family's vehicle, Walton Enterprises, controls not just Walmart's stock, but a vast portfolio of investments, a newspaper chain, and charitable foundations. Properly structured, a foundation converts taxable wealth into a legacy vehicle the founding family controls in perpetuity, while receiving substantial tax advantages. At this scale, philanthropy is not generosity, it is governance. The Koch network went further. Charles and David Koch built what political scientists call a state within a state, a network of think tanks, political action committees, and media channels that shapes the policy environment their businesses operate in. They didn't just play the game, they redesigned the field. What distinguishes modern dynasties from their predecessors is speed and complexity. The Medicis moved capital by courier on horseback. Today, a family office can shift billions across continents before sunrise. The tools are new: special purpose vehicles, sovereign wealth co-investments, digital asset custodians. But the philosophy is identical. Embed yourself in infrastructure. Convert visible wealth into invisible influence. Build institutions that outlast individuals. There is a legal structure pioneered in South Dakota called the Dynasty Trust. It allows assets to remain in trust indefinitely, exempt from estate taxes, generation-skipping transfer taxes, and, critically, from the decisions of heirs who might spend it. The wealth is placed beyond the reach of even the family itself, compounding quietly for centuries. This is not wealth management. This is wealth immortality.
In our final chapter, we ask the one question nobody in finance likes to answer. What does it cost the rest of us when capital concentrates this efficiently?
Chapter 3. The Reckoning, the price of concentrated power. Every empire carries within it the seeds of the resistance that will eventually rise to challenge it. That is not sentiment, it is historical law. The Roman Empire fell not because its armies were defeated. They had weathered invasions for centuries. It fell because the wealth gap between the senatorial class and the rest of the empire grew so extreme that the productive base of society could no longer sustain the overhead of the ruling structure. Sound familiar? The United States today has a wealth distribution that is, by most measurable metrics, more concentrated than at any point since 1929. The top 1% holds more wealth than the entire middle class combined. The Gini coefficient, the standard measure of inequality, sits at levels that, in other historical contexts, have preceded significant social reorganization. And yet, the dynasties endure. Why? Because the most sophisticated aspect of structural wealth is not how it compounds, it is how it defends itself. Every major dynastic family employs teams of what are quietly called reputational architects. These are not PR firms, they are institutions, think tanks, media properties, cultural foundations that shape the language we use to talk about wealth, success, and fairness. When a billionaire funds a university chair in economics, they are not just making a donation. They are influencing the intellectual framework within which the next generation of economists will develop their models. When a dynasty funds a museum, it is not just art. It is culture, and culture decides what is considered possible. This is the final layer of the blueprint. First-generation wealth creates. Second-generation wealth consolidates. The third generation, the generation that matters most, builds the institutions that make the whole structure seem natural. But history is longer than any dynasty's planning horizon. The Medicis were expelled from Florence in 1494. They returned. They were expelled again in 1527. They returned again. And then, finally, in 1737, the last Medici died without an heir, and the most powerful banking dynasty in Western history simply ended. The Rothschilds are still here. The Waltons are still here. The Kochs are still here. But every system that has ever existed, every empire, every dynasty, every architecture of concentrated power has eventually encountered a force it could not absorb. We do not know what that force will be for the dynasties of the 21st century. It may be technology, AI redistributing the returns to capital in ways no dynasty anticipated. It may be climate, physical geography becoming the great equalizer. It may be something we cannot see yet, but it will come, because it always does. The only question is, when the old architecture falls, who will be building the new one? Power this old does not announce itself. It waits, in trusts that compound across generations, in institutions that shape the questions a society is allowed to ask, in rules built by people who don't play by them. The question worth sitting with is this: if the system was designed by those already inside it, can it ever truly be redesigned by those who aren't? If that question stays with you, subscribe. The next chapter is already being written.